Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. Consider checking out the monthly membership, the Teach the Geek to Speak Society. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Deborah Thomson. She is a veterinarian and author of the book, The Art of Science Communication. I had the pleasure of reading her book, and I'm keen to ask her about it. I'm also interested to learn more about her journey to becoming a vet, as well as her other initiative, One Health Lessons. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Dr. Thompson.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So, my first question, where did your interest in veterinary medicine come from?
Oh boy. So I'm a very curious person by nature, just like a lot of scientists and engineers, I guess you would say. So honestly, when I was younger, I was thinking about a whole lot of different career paths, including even architect or musician or teacher or medical doctor, human medicine. But when I started following around veterinarians, that's when I stopped the search. That's when I realized that with one action, I could help not only animals, but also the people relying on those animals. And so that realization was quite meaningful to me.
Excellent. So it wasn't that you had an issue with people, so you decided to be a doctor for animals instead.
You have to work with people to make sure that animals improve their health. Yes.
Nice. So then you become a veterinarian. What exactly, I guess, the job that you had as a veterinarian, what did it entail?
So I have been a clinical veterinarian since 2012. And so that's when I was working in just normal animal hospitals, mostly small animal, just because I have been living in urban settings right near cities. So mainly cats and dogs, but also my smallest patient was tiny, 80 grams, a dwarf hamster. And then my largest patient was an Asian elephant. So the cool thing about veterinary medicine is that we're trained with all species minus people, but there's a little caveat to that. Veterinarians are trained in diseases that can transmit from animals to people because we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our communities. So that's the one catch when I talk about the human aspect. Um, but yeah, clinical medicine is awesome. But also during veterinary school, I learned about something called One Health, which is the interconnection between our health and the health of the environment, animals, and plants. And at that point, I was like, why didn't I know about this when I was 6 years old? Why didn't I know about this 20 years before? Because I feel like I could have lived life a little bit differently with a new perspective. You know what I mean? So at that point, I graduated from veterinary school, have been practicing in clinics. But then after doing my 10 to 12-hour shifts, I used to go home and for fun create lessons for children and adults about One Health. And I could do that because before vet school, I was teaching in schools.
Oh, wow, you've
So
had quite an interesting life. So you were teaching, and then you went to vet school, and you became a veterinarian. So my little bit of knowledge of veterinarians is when I worked in medical devices, we would do preclinical studies every now and then, and so we would use, or not use, but we would enlist the help of veterinarians to do those implantations of our medical devices into, I think we used rabbits, and at the
mhm.
time, and it didn't work. It didn't end so well for some of those rabbits, unfortunately.
Right, veterinarians, yeah, veterinarians. We as a group of professionals, we're often behind the curtains. We're often the people who are doing the work that are not necessarily in the front of the cameras. We further science, but in a way that is often unexpected.
Yeah. So you mentioned, well, and I also mentioned One Health Lessons. So if someone were to, peruse the One Health Lessons site, what would they see?
Yeah, onehealthlessons.com. You could see 7 different age appropriate lessons that are right now focused on COVID-19, where the virus likely came from, how to protect ourselves today, how scientists are working together to protect people in the future, what are mutations, why are they important to know about, and what are vaccines and why are they important to know about. So these lessons are designed for children as young as 6 years old and for adults as old as you can be. But because of my background in teaching, I knew what would work and what wouldn't work for certain age groups. And with my veterinary background and me just being naturally a curious person and reading a lot of scientific articles and having discussions with friends who are postdoctorates in immunology and vaccinology and virology and all of that, that's how these lessons came to be.
Wow.
And they're freely accessible and they're being translated right now into 84 different languages.
Oh wow, that's great. So you have no excuse to not know. If you can't say, "Well, I don't know English," well, it's going to be in your language soon enough.
That's cool. I want every single child and adult on this planet to know about One Health and to care about One Health.
Nice. So is there, I guess, I mean, you did say that it was age appropriate, so from 6 years old all the way to adults. So when you say age appropriate, obviously there's going to be some differences communicating with a 6 year old as opposed to an adult. Although I think in some instances, at least when it comes to COVID, perhaps there might not be as much difference as we might think because there's a, if you're not a scientific, type of person, if you're an adult, I mean, there's still going to be some, I guess, what's the word? Best word. I don't want to say dumbing down, but you're going to have to speak to them at a level that they know. So how do you go about making sure that the information that you're imparting is, at least for the adults, is something that they can understand, but you don't want to make it seem like you're talking down to them like they're children?
Right, exactly. So the way the 18 plus lesson is, the one that's meant for adults, it's designed in such a way that ideally the audience would then use that material and switch that material to help the children in their lives, their grandchildren, their children, their students. So there are examples that can be used with the next generation of leaders who are going to be inheriting this earth. And the goal is, regardless of what age we are talking about, I want the students to laugh, to play, to have fun. And I know that sounds kind of silly for adults to laugh and play and have fun, but if you do get an audience to laugh, then you're going to have a greater chance of having somebody remember. If you are familiar with the saying, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel, then if people feel like they have some type of connection to this lesson, then they're more prone to remember the essence of that lesson.
Gotcha. I mean, and then I mentioned also in the intro your book, The Art of Science Communication, and I was able to read it. I really enjoyed it. I like the fact that it was brief. I mean, I read a lot of, there's a lot of books out there that I think are just unnecessarily long. There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of fluff that's put into the books, but at least with yours, it was a quick read, but it was an interesting read and it was an impactful read. So, what was the motivation for writing your book?
Right. Thanks for that. I wanted bang for your buck, and I wanted the book to be able to fit in a briefcase, a backpack, or a purse. I didn't want it to be an epic novel. I wanted it to be impactful, just like what you had said, and quite insightful. I want people to take out the highlighter, take out the pen, highlight everything that they want to, write notes on, put stars everywhere. But how this book came to be, I never thought that I would honestly be an author. What happened was, after I finished my work on Capitol Hill, because I was a science policy advisor, I was a fellow associated with AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. I know it's a mouthful, but to even expand upon that mouthful, my true title was Science and Engineering Policy Fellow, and I was working in the United States Senate with one of the most senior senators in the United States Congress. So I was the token scientist. And on a typical day, what happened was I was attending these meetings with visiting scientists and my colleagues in the office. And after the meeting ended or ends, then my colleagues typically say, okay, Deb, can you translate this for us? How is this meaningful to us? What can we do with this? Is this even worth pursuing? And so I thought, okay, I need to write down my notes with all the lessons learned throughout the entire year's experience on Capitol Hill. And I'm looking at these notes and I'm like, wow, I need to share this. I need more people to know this, because it's not every day that you get the incredible opportunity to work on the inside on Capitol Hill and know how politicians work, and really know what's behind the curtain. So think of this book in that section, because there are 3 sections of the book, but in that section of the book, think of it like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, but for scientists and engineers.
Gotcha. You did mention that the book is broken down into 3 sections, and the first is for children, the second's for the public, and then the third is for policymakers. What was the reasoning for combining all the audiences into one book as opposed to having 3 separate books?
Right. That is an excellent question. And it's honestly something that even my editor said, you have multiple books in this. And I say, well, great, then just market it as multiple books in one. But here's the reason why I wanted this to be in one book. If you are going to be willing to speak with people in policy, you need to practice before speaking with people in policy. You have one chance to make a first impression. Now, what is the most honest audience that you can ever imagine? It's children. So children tell you if they're bored, children tell you if they don't understand. If you can communicate your niche knowledge to children, then you'll be able to communicate with adults, and you'll be able to cultivate your message to meet the needs of that audience. So children are an incredible, let's say it like this. Children are like sponges, right? I say in the books, children are like stem cells. They can develop into anything you can imagine. Parents, grandparents, scientists, engineers, politicians, teachers. So if you could imagine what type of influence you would have by speaking with children at the age of, say, 8 years old, and instill in them a passion for science and engineering and STEM in general, then they develop into, say, a politician. How do you think policy might change in the future? Is going to be innate knowledge, innate acceptance, innate passion for STEM. And that's how you can have long-lasting changes in society, to include those children. So I need to have people who are going to be speaking with people of substantial influence and power to be as good communicators as possible. And the best way to practice that is by being a science role model with children.
Yeah, you know what? I think there's something to be said about that. I think you're absolutely right. So if you're a kid and you know about all these scientific issues at such a young age, then as you get older, then you're going to become hopefully more interested in them, as time goes on. So that by the time you get to being an adult, communicating or getting or receiving that type of information won't be as daunting as if perhaps you didn't get that kind of information when you were younger. And so, yeah, I suppose it does make sense that there are those 3 different sections to the book. So now, one thing that I was just thinking about is, so you're working as a veterinarian and then you become a policy fellow in government. I'm sure that that's not normal, but no, I'll say normal. That's not a normal progression for a veterinarian. What was the motivation to even go into government?
Such a good question. So I reviewed why I wanted to be a vet, right? My one action could help not only animals, but the people who are relying on those animals, right? For food, for livelihood, for companionship, whatever the reason may be. I had the opportunity to volunteer with the California Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because in 2018, as you and probably a lot of your listeners remember, there was something called the Camp Fire in Northern California, and that's the area where I was living. Now, with the California Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps, I was called to go assist with a community where there were a lot of found animals. And we were not only caring for the health of these animals and the well-being, but also the well-being of the people who had to find shelter and housing that couldn't have the animals around. That experience changed my life for several reasons. The reason why I applied for a policy fellowship position was because I realized at the moment when I was helping with the Camp Fire response that I wanted to be in a position and have the opportunity to not just affect the families, the direct families of my patients, but the communities. I wanted to have an impact, a beneficial impact on a larger population of people and animals. And so that led me to considering applying for a policy fellowship in Washington, D.C. So moving from the West Coast to the East, it was a massive shift on so many levels. But I was fortunate to be the single winner of that fellowship position. So I was representing my profession on Capitol Hill, which was incredible to think about. And I feel like I learned a lot, and I feel like a lot of people learned, hopefully a lot of people learned from me, especially in regards to animal health and welfare, but also infectious diseases, zoonotic diseases, which transmit between animals and people. And certainly the pandemic was during the time when I was on Capitol Hill. So I was highly involved in helping with response for that.
So is policy work something that you're interested in continuing on doing, or going back to being a veterinarian, or maybe a mix of both?
Excellent. I think a mix of both, absolutely. Because I will forever be a veterinarian if I work in the clinics, in the animal hospitals, or if I work in policy, because the same goal is there, right? To help animals and people achieve as optimal health as possible. But I do like going into clinics on occasion, but I also want to keep the policy aspect of my life because I want to have far-reaching effects, and not just with the patient right in front of me, not just the animal in front of me and its family, but I want to have a broader influence and impact if possible. So I see it on two levels.
One thing I was just thinking about veterinarians and medical doctors, the differences. At least I know with medical doctors, you go to medical school and then you do a residency and then maybe you do a fellowship to specialize. Is it similar for veterinarians?
It's similar. Yep. So in North America, at least, well, I'll say in the United States, it's 4 years of undergrad, then 4 years of vet school. Then you have the opportunity to do an internship for a year, and then you have several years of residency. Right now in 2021, there's starting to be, it's very few, but there's starting to be some programs for fellowships for subspecialty. But compared to human medicine, we don't have nearly as many subspecialties as what exists there. And I have been practicing as a general practitioner. Think of it like a family doctor for humans. But I've also worked in the emergency department, worked in shelters, animal shelters. On a normal day, I could do some soft tissue surgery like a spay or a neuter, then I could do a dental, and then I could fix an ear infection or an eye issue, or a wellness exam where I give vaccines. So because I'm just a naturally curious person and I like variety, it's yet another reason why I wanted to be a vet, because you cannot be bored as a vet.
Gotcha. When it comes to presenting, because now you have this book, The Art of of science communication, so you're an expert in communication. So when it comes to your presentations, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Yes, yes, I do. My very first step is to know the audience. Do as much research as possible with knowing the audience. Um, After that, it depends on what I see the audience needs to know. Where are the gaps in knowledge? What can I contribute to a meaningful conversation? And when it comes to um, if a convention or conference lectures or even webinars, I try my best to make the presentation into a conversation. I want to include the audience as much as possible and hear their contributions, because that's what communication is all about, right? It's not one-sided. I need to have active listening throughout my presentation to see what and how the audience responds to the words that I use. And if there are questions, what are the questions? And also, why are they asking those questions? Is there a gap in knowledge that's leading to that question? So I'm constantly analyzing and trying to improve myself, um, and tailoring the message to meet the needs of the audience.
You know, when you say when you get questions, why you're getting those questions, it reminds me of when I had to give presentations in front of management when I worked as in medical devices as an engineer, and I get these questions afterwards. And now looking back, I know exactly why I was getting those questions, because I didn't put the presentation in such a way that these people could understand. I didn't know my audience. I would just get up there and just talk and try to get out of there as quickly as possible. But I never got out of there as quickly as possible because I get these questions afterwards. And I have to answer them. And I just think, maybe if I just tailored the presentation better, that perhaps I would be getting these questions. But wouldn't you have it? I didn't even get that message after that first time when I was getting these questions, or the second time, or even the third time. It took quite a number of times for me to get the message that I need to change my message.
Live and learn, right? And
Absolutely.
so after I started participating in a communication club called Toastmasters, um, and I was the token scientist in those clubs, I felt like I could not only actively listen at the same time as speak, but also have a better understanding of how to evaluate an audience based on their feedback. So live and learn, right? Everything's from your experiences.
That's it. Do you ever get nervous before you give a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. Yes, I still get nervous, particularly if I idolize somebody who's in the audience. But there's a trick that I learned when I was a musician. I used to be a working musician before even being a teacher or being teaching in middle school and elementary school. So the way in music, the way I could calm nerves is practice, practice, practice. Know that you've done as much as possible in preparation, but also try to clear your head before speaking and see the end goal. What do you actually want to accomplish from this speech in this sense? Do you want to have the audience think more? Do you want them to act on something? Do you want them to share knowledge? What is your ultimate goal? So seeing the end in mind gives you a clearer picture of what your mission is. And with your mission well in sight, then you'll be able to concentrate on that and just move forward and do the speech.
Wow. So you were a musician, then you were a teacher, then you were a veterinarian. You lived like a number of lives, like a cat, like the cats that you operate on. Yeah, that's you. No wonder you became a veterinarian. This makes perfect sense now. My God, you've done quite a bit in your time on this earth. That's impressive. A lot of times people will stay in one place and they think that's where they have to stay, but not you. You went from a musician to a teacher to a veterinarian to a policy fellow. It's like, what's next for Dr. Thomson? Who knows? Wherever life takes her. I commend you for making those types of transitions, because a lot of times people get stuck in whatever they're doing, and they think that, well, that's the best there is for me. But not you. You definitely, you take those chances. So kudos to you.
Well, thanks. And I get inspired by so many people and with so many backgrounds. Like you, Neil, for instance, you're an engineer. I am so impressed with engineers, and I always love speaking with engineers because honestly, like I said, I'm a curious person, so I love just geeking out on anything engineering. And I learn from others. And then I was not even thinking of doing a policy fellowship until, of course, Campfire, but then also speaking with other people in policy, because until then, I never even thought of it. So having these conversations really opens up your mind to what else is out there.
Absolutely. This has been a great conversation, Dr. Thompson. Thank you for taking time to speak with me today. How can people get in touch with you?
Thanks. You can always go to www.deborah, DEBORAH, Thompson, THOMSON.com. There's a request availability, so happy to be on be at a convention or a conference that that you're planning. And then also onehealthlessons.com. There's a way to reach out for me there, and then you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure to speak with you.
Absolutely. It's pleasure's all mine. Everybody, this marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com, and you can check out the monthly membership, Teach the Geek to Speak Society. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.